Hi everyone, my name is Mankirat Gujral.
And I'm Rachel Carson.
And we are the co-hosts of the Muscle Health Research Center, also known as the MHRC Podcast series
at York University Faculty of Health. On this podcast, we interview students, professors, and industry partners who bring unique and valuable insights. From cutting-edge scientific discoveries to behind-the-scenes experiences in the lab, we explore the work and the people driving innovation in their fields.
Our goal is to highlight not only the science, but the passion, challenges, and the curiosity that shape the future of human health. Whether you're a trainee, a researcher, or simply someone curious about the science of movement, you're in the right place.
All right, let's dive into today's podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the MHRC Podcast. I hope you're all doing well today. We have a special guest with us today, Sabrina Champsi. She completed her bachelor's at York University in the biomedical science stream. This was when she first began her research journey. She completed 2 research courses under the supervision of Dr. Mankirat, examining the pathology of type 2 diabetes in rodent models. She later completed her honors thesis with Dr. Gary Sweeney, where she evaluated the role of a pharmaceutical in rescuing ischemia-induced cell death in cardiomyocytes. And finally joined the Hood Lab, where she completed her MSc and now currently her PhD. Her MSc focused on evaluating the protective effect of sulforaphane, a compound naturally found in broccoli, and comparing its effects to a cell culture model of exercise. Currently, she's examining a novel set of proteins called prohibitins, which are found within the mitochondria, attempting to understand how these proteins change as we age and exercise. Awesome. So Sabrina, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming today. So let's dive into the first question. Could you please walk us through your academic journey as to why you chose a specific field of research, and how did you find the lab in general?
Yeah, for sure. I think prior to my segue into the academic journey, just during my undergrad and even high school, I was always really interested in understanding how food and exercise can be such a powerful tool to modulate your health, both negatively and positively. I was also very lucky that my supervisor, Dr. David Hood, was investigating a series of different nutraceuticals and pharmaceutical agents when I entered the lab. And he happened to give me this compound called sulforaphane to investigate. And this was budding off of some great work that was done by the previous MSc student, Nusha Murati, who's now a PhD candidate. Shout out to Nusha, does great work.
Yay.
Yeah. But she was the one who first examined it, and we were really excited about the results that we saw. They were pretty remarkable and actually quite comparable to our effects of muscle contraction in vitro. We call it our exercise in a dish model, where you essentially stimulate myotubes in culture. And we essentially combine that with this agent. And we now have this published in AJP Cell if you want to take a closer look. But that was kind of my MSc project. And we actually do have a new PhD student who is currently examining its effects in an animal model as well. And like I said, it kind of just worked out that way, where my interests did align with what Dr. David Hood was doing. So it was definitely a great pair there for sure. And now just continuing with my PhD project, I really wanted to continue looking at the benefits of exercise, as well as looking at different agents as well. But we came across actually a set of proteins called prohibitins. It's really interesting, actually. It was a part of my 555 project, which is a project that Dr. Hood gives to all of the students in his grad course. It's usually about a protein that we don't really know much about and that he's excited about, we've seen good literature about, and he gave me prohibitins. There were so many amazing quality control pathways that these proteins were involved in, but we didn't know anything about it in muscle or how it changes with age or exercise. So, I mean, honestly, Dave is a saint for agreeing to, go with this project and really trust me. So we are currently investigating how these proteins change, like I said, with age and exercise. So I'm really excited about it. And I'm really happy that I ended up choosing York to do my PhD, because I've had such a good experience here during my undergrad with Dr. Dr. Sweeney, and of course, my amazing supervisor, Dr. Hood. So I'm really excited to be here. And York has such great infrastructure in terms of training its trainees and creating highly qualified personnel. So that's something that you think about when you're choosing not only your lab, but also the environment that you're in. So definitely consider those things. Yeah.
Hey, awesome. Thank you for sharing your experience here at York, and shout out to all the amazing supervisors that you've had. And I think just Dr. Hood giving you this opportunity to kind of develop, to really examine this prohibitins molecule. I think that's really cool. Okay, awesome. So on to our second question. What advice would you give to students that are looking for research positions?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question and comes up time and time again because students are interested in research, but they don't really know where to start. And unfortunately, the advice I have is to try again. You're going to get rejected more than you get success for sure. And I remember when I was in my undergrad and I was trying to find a research position, I reached out to definitely over 20 professors just to see if I could volunteer in their labs, from just washing dishware, sweeping the floors, just to get a feel of the lab environment. And I got so many rejections, I really thought I was doing something wrong. But all it takes is one professor to really see something in you and believe that you have something that they can work with and that you have something worth nurturing. And I didn't have any prior connections to any professors, and I didn't know how to connect with them. So I kind of did it the old-fashioned way in terms of just contacting them. I did contact some professors that taught my classes, but once again, they didn't really show any interest when I did reach out. So I did do it the old-fashioned way. But looking back and trying to give some advice to trainees, I would also advise people to look at the York websites to see what type of research opportunities are available. I did do this later as I was segueing into more research opportunities, but a really great one was the research practicum course. So it is a 0 credit course that's offered at York where you essentially just have a write-up, but you are a volunteer. It shows up on your transcript, which I think is great. But there are also other things if you're interested in paid positions. So the Research at York or RAY program. Of course, you have your honors thesis, your independent study courses. These are all courses you do with a professor. These will all help you obtain paid positions later. So it's always helpful to utilize the York websites. I also think it helps to pick a topic that truly resonates with you, because if it's something that you like, you will probably be enthusiastic about and want to put more effort into. So for example, if you don't really care much about yeast genetics, maybe don't pick a PI studying it just for the sake of getting a research position. Maybe hold out for something more interesting to you. So there's a lot of alignment that needs to happen.
Okay, no, that's for sure. And thank you so much for sharing these resources with us, because a lot of students might not know about them. I know in my 4th year, I knew of an independent study course which I actually did in my 4th year, but I wasn't sure about the research at York, the RAY positions, or even the research practicum student position. I literally found out that right now through you. So I feel these opportunities are kind of hidden away.
They're definitely hidden away. And I mean, other than the York websites, I also heard these things through word of mouth. So even the independent study course, another student told me about it. And this wasn't something I found online. It's just right time, right place. But now that I know, I want to tell people about it so they have that opportunity.
For sure. No, thank you. And thank you so much for sharing all this insight with us. Perfect. So what skills do you think are the most important for success in an academic research today?
So I think the answer for this may be different or vary depending on the field of research you're in, but there are a few soft skills I think are pretty standard. The first and most important, in my opinion, is definitely critical thinking and your ability to analyze your results. And this is because as a researcher, you have to not only be able to understand the work that has already been done and examine the strengths and limitations, but you also have to be able to go beyond existing literature, breaking down complex problems into smaller components that are solvable for you, and understanding what tools you have in order to approach those questions. So critical thinking is definitely really important. And I think one that's not talked about enough is probably perseverance. Research is really hard. It's often filled, like I said, with more challenges and obstacles than success, unfortunately. So we have to learn to persevere through difficult situations, adapt and become more resilient, and having a more positive outlook if you can. And that kind of goes back to your support system. If you have hopefully a nurturing lab environment, a good PI, good support at home, but perseverance is really critical to this process when you think about the long road ahead. And I think effective communication. And this is because being able to translate your work to a wide range of audiences really is important for translatability. And this can range from writing grants, publishing a paper, or just explaining your project to a layman. Like I told you, for example, sulforaphane. It's found in broccoli. It's kind of like exercise. We call it an exercise mimetic. I'm not giving you the most detail, but you kind of get a grasp of what the research is. So being able to translate that is critical, for sure.
Awesome. No, I completely agree with you too, because it's like you're doing research, but if you are unable to translate that research in like everyday words to another person, then what's the point of research then if you're unable to translate it to another person? Then the knowledge just stays to one person, and that's not what research is all about. It's about teaching. It's about sharing the knowledge.
Exactly. The whole point is how can we actually figure out these things and reach different audiences to help people? Because I think that is the whole point of science in general.
Exactly. Yeah. I completely agree.
I also think some other ways that students can start developing these skills can be seeking this lab experience early. Which allows you to not only develop your technical skills, but even with starting with classes that offer maybe a lab component, but it helps you build those foundational skills that you might need later in research. So this is something I wish somebody told me when I was doing my undergrad, but please master the basics of reference managers and different software, things like PowerPoint, Excel, but also those reference managers like Zotero, Mendeley, EndNote. Gain proficiency in those things because those will really help you down the road. That's super critical. Yeah.
No, thank you for expanding on that, because as I told you before, in my undergraduate, in my independent study course in my undergrad, in my 4th year, I literally did all my references by hand.
I did it too, yeah.
Like no one told me. And then when I submitted the paper and I told my supervisor, I'm like, hey, like I did all the references by hand and that took so long. And he's like, you didn't have to do that. You can just use like a reference manager. I'm like, really? I had no, like, it was so stupid.
Yeah. The worst is then when you want to actually submit to a journal and the reference style needs to be something completely different.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that by hand, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. I agree. Do you have a favorite reference manager?
Definitely Zotero.
Me too.
I've used EndNote and Mendeley and they have crashed out multiple times. So Zotero is the best. I stand by that for sure.
I haven't tried the other ones, but I've only tried Zotero and it's working amazingly.
Fantastic. You can make shared libraries as well if you want to collaborate with somebody else. If you're working on a paper together, they have access to all of those. You can log into it and then just download everything once again. Super helpful.
Okay, I agree. So on to our last question now. How do you see yourself, how do you see your field evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? And what type of emerging research areas do you think will have the greatest impact?
For sure. I think specifically in my field of exercise physiology and mitochondrial research, I think the most important thing will be moving away from more static markers. So a lot of the time, we often have some type of intervention, whether that be pharmaceutical or exercise, and we're taking a muscle biopsy and analyzing proteins, mRNA, things of that nature. But this doesn't really fully encompass the dynamic mapping of protein pathways, and it doesn't really tell us what's happening in terms of flux measurements or how things are changing over time. So I think moving away from more endpoint assays will help us kind of understand how muscle is working as a whole, which is a better representation of human movement. I think also single cell and multi-omics integration is really important. So lean muscle analysis has shown us that there are really specific niche cellular populations that are responsible for a lot of the things that we see in muscle, a lot of the things that change. So for example, if your muscle is breaking down with age, why is that? Maybe there are specific cellular populations that are responsible for that. So taking those specific cells and looking at omic analysis, so looking at how mRNA, protein is changing, how those things integrate in order to understand how niche populations impact muscle. So getting a little bit more specific or higher resolution, I think, with muscle is going to be really critical. And I think, kind of selfishly thinking about the mitochondria in terms of muscle research, I think targeting mitochondrial health is going to be critical because we know through different pharmaceutical activators and different exercise interventions that mitochondrial health is very intimately linked to muscle health. So thinking about how different interventions can target that, I think, are definitely going to be a part of the future. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to our podcast today. Any last words you want to share before we leave?
I think last words probably is just don't take it so seriously. A lot of the time with research and just it's a very long road in terms of 5 to 10 years when you get to where you want to be in terms of if that's being a PI or being in industry. It's a daunting road, but as long as you enjoy your research and you're excited about it and you're working hard and you take every day one day at a time, you're gonna be okay.
Yeah, I think that's what gets you through the hard days. You know, when
Absolutely.
when your results aren't working or your paper gets rejected or you're just having a problem, it's like, why did I start this in the first place?
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. So this wraps up our 4th episode of the MHRC podcast. We have here Rachel with us behind the scenes. I'm your host, Mankirat, and we have our very special guest, Sabrina Champsi. See you next time.
That wraps up today's episode of the MHRC podcast.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and a special thank you to our guests for sharing their insights and experiences.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube so you never miss future conversations.
And to learn more about the Muscle Health Research Center and the work happening here at York University, including our upcoming events and resources, check out our channels and stay connected.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. That wraps up today's episode of the MHRC Podcast.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and a special thank you to our guests for sharing their insights and experiences.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube so you never miss future conversations.
And to learn more about the Muscle Health Research Center and the work happening here at York University, including our upcoming events and resources, check out our channels and stay connected.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.